Thank you everybody for coming. I'm Tracy Ashton. I am Business Development Manager and Property Manager for the team here in Southland. And with me tonight I have our team leader Wayne Thompson and three other property managers as part of my team. So Imogen and Annalise and Mark want to come up here, just introduce yourselves as well, that'd be great. And while they're coming up here, I'll just introduce, we've also got Tim Frampton here, our sales manager, Jamie McKenzie, who is our regional manager at the back there. We also have our general manager, David Faulkner, over here, of property management. We also have Chris Peterson from Peterson Mortgages talking tonight, and Elsa Wolf, who is the property coach, speaking tonight. So Imogen, Annalise and Mark, our awesome team of property managers. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. No. Okay, good evening everybody. So as Tracy's introduced me, I'm David. I head the property management division for property brokers. I'm going to just make sure there's no feedback. And before we get into it, just a big shout out, we've got some great suppliers who really do help us with our property management businesses. They do a lot of bloody great work for us. And they become also more than just big suppliers, they are our eyes and ears, and they tell us when there's like a little bit of shit going down in the tenancy. So Southern Electrical and Refrigeration, Hara Hubby, Healthy Homes New Zealand and What's Right, big thank you very much for your support for this evening. It really does help. So big little bit of a hand for those, because we won't do this without them. Thank you. Right. So, you know, you're going to have me talk, and then you're going to have Chris, and then you'll have Elsa talk as well. But first of all, I'm going to talk about what's happening with rents and what is impacting rents at the moment. I'm also going to give you a bit of an update on some of the legislation changes which our new government, what can we still call them, new governments? I think they are. They're going to make some changes to the Residential Tenancies Act, which will basically reverse a lot of the things that the Labour coalition government has done. Okay. But before I wanted to get into this, who saw the announcement yesterday on Kayangarora? Did anybody pick that up on the news? Yeah? Yeah? So, I mean, I'd like to say I was surprised, but I wasn't. But what did surprise me was the size. Right? I'm sure Chris will be able to touch on it because he deals with, Chris specialises with investors in his mortgage brokering business. But seeing that they are currently running at I think it's going to be a 700 million deficit for the year. And I think I was reading it and I was trying to swat up. I took a couple of screenshots of the actual reports, which you can download now from the Beehive and the announcements. And Sir Bill English did the report on this. It's just neglect of taxpayers' money. And we would see it in our business. Across the country, the landlords would be encouraged to go to Kayangarora, they'd pay market rent and they'd just put the tenants in. And you know, I mean, I think they've been forecasted to be, if you can point it out on the graph, this is $20 billion in excess. They're forecasted the way they're going. They're going to be in 26, 27, around about $23 billion worth in debt. And I think it's been calculated as like, I mean, I've not done the maths, I'm just reading what's been quoted, but $4,000 per New Zealander is what we've got to pay. This highlights, the reason why it's relevant, I'm not here to bag off the government, because they've actually, I believe they've done some good things in changing rules on Residential Tenancies Act to make life a bit fairer for tenants. I will critique left and right. I will give my opinion. And what you hear tonight, it's not property broker's opinion, it's David Faulkner's opinion. You can agree, you can disagree. That's what democracy is about. That we can sit here and have a discussion and not get into our little echo chambers on Facebook and start slagging each other off. Okay? So there you go. this is what we're seeing in migration. Migration has an impact on rents, quite a significant impact. And we have had some real high migration numbers. It is now starting to come back. Interestingly though, when you have a look and you break down the stats, where do you think the people are coming from? Which country has the highest migration coming into New Zealand? Philippines. Who said Philippines? Yeah. Number 2. Are you through the Philippines? Yeah. Good on you. Okay. Number 2. Who's number 1? India. Very good. Okay. And this graph shows you where they're actually coming from. But what caught my eye when you're looking at the stats is how many New Zealanders. So the green is the 2024. Years 2024, 2023, 2019, that's just before COVID. So they've left out all the COVID years, which is a better indicator. Listen, I love my cricket, and I tell you what, I'm pretty excited about so many Indians coming into New Zealand, because we'll have a pretty decent cricket team, you'd like to think. Right? But we've got a lot of New Zealanders going. A lot. They're probably going, at a guess, to Australia. Okay? But when you've got, so we've got net migration of, I think it's about, at the peak, it was about 132,000, like the last, yeah, that's the net migration. Migration arrivals, migration, the green's the net migration. It's starting to come down, but we've still got a lot of people coming into New Zealand and making New Zealand their home. Look, I'm a migrant, come from the UK, you know, and I love migrants, because migrants typically, what I see them, they come over, they work their asses off. You know, that's what they do. Okay? All this has an influence on what is happening with rent. So you can see this is a whole population. It is consistently going up. How are properties keeping up to date? Now, interestingly, I worked out some little numbers on this. This is information, I get this from stats, and it looks at the number of dwellings. So I think the green line is what's rented. And back in 2014, so this is like a 10-year graph, there's about 550 rental properties. This line has consistently grown, and we're now at about 660. Right? We're playing 660 before, 660,000 rentals. Now, back then, there was 2.56 people per property, worked out very, very rough. Now, it's at 2.58, so it's hardly changed. Hardly changed. What I'm trying to understand, and where do we get this housing crisis if population or properties is growing at more or less the same rate as population? Has the family dynamics changed? Are people having kids later? Are we seeing more people divorce? And when you look at apartments in Auckland, I reckon there's been a lot of apartments in Auckland and whatever. Plus, you've got a rebuild going on in Christchurch in this as well. You may have smaller properties as well, like 1- 2-bedroom units. Right? So this is all the type of information which I look at, and I'm not an economist. I'm not. I do like my data. And in property management is about small data. It's different from sales. Sales, big transactions, not many of them. Property management, literally in our department where we have about 8,000 properties nationwide, we're collecting somewhere around $20 million worth of rent. That I calculated it, 500,000 financial transactions a year. And that's great, because it gives us data which we can make predictions, pretty accurate predictions, which will help our investors. All this is publicly available, by the way. It's easy to go and find. It's publicly available. Right, so what I'm looking at, what's happening is with rents. And I look at Invercargill and I look at New Zealand. And you can see that these lines probably go in a similar direction. Right? And round about here, round about this 2017, 2018, you start to see a significant spike. Traditionally, rents will grow at about 4% per annum. When you look at records from, say, 1993, when they started collecting bond data, which is probably the same time when we started to get an internet and computers, right? And the trend line has significantly gone up. I just cannot see it going at the level of increases that it's gone in recent years. Unemployment is going to become an issue. Right? I've got a good friend who, part owner of Tommy's in Wellington, he owns the property management department. He's saying that the rental market has tanked as you've got lots of layoffs in the government, which, look, in all honesty, probably you could see it coming. Right? You could see it coming. But this graph interests me the most. What I've done here, I wanted to compare what is happening in the two different decades. So this is, the red line is 2004 to 2014, right, in Invercargill. Very slow, very steady, very consistent, very predictable if you look at the trend line. Then you look at 2014 to 2024. Up to about here, and you can see the level of growth. And this is replicated all across provincial New Zealand. You have this 4%. Come and sit at the front. Don't be embarrassed being late. That's okay. No one sits at the front. You can be the first. Right? Now, I've just got a feeling with whether the change of government has got anything to do with it. They had a bit more landlord friendly, but I've just got a feeling that rents are going to level out. And I genuinely do believe, met Chris Bishop a couple of times, I genuinely believe they actually do care about tenants, regardless of what people what they think is like, remove the regulation, increase supply, supply-demand, basic economics. That's how they think. And this will be better and fairer for tenants. Right? And you can see in active bonds, the trend line of active bonds, you probably gathered it like the graphs. All right? And again, it's a little bit up, a little bit down, goes up, this is the number of bonds, so it gives you an indication of supply. And you see that it just, again, round about 2050, we've got to slow down. It's starting to increase, and I think this trend line, I've got a feeling, bit of a gut feeling, and looking at, I just think there's going to be some investors who are going to come back into the market. Bright line, all these things. Chris will talk about it more than me. This is just my gut feeling. When I look at data, you'll start to see this increase. And that's another reason why I think rents may start to, the rent growth will start to slow down. What is a concern is tenancy tribunal. Not because our tenancy tribunal operates. Big cases for property brokers. I know the RTA really well. I'll go and represent property brokers. And I actually believe, you'll get the odd biased or an adjudicator who's got a social agenda or whatever. But when the adjudicators I've gone in and done the cases for, I've actually found them to be very fair and balanced. And I think a lot of it comes down to preparation. Right? They started taking records on the type of applications here at the first quarter of 2020. So all these are landlord applications, these are tenant applications. I honestly thought, with changes to the Residential Tenancies Act that Labour made, where it makes it more difficult to get a tenant out, tenants have got name suppression, so they are protected. I honestly thought we would see a spike in landlords starting to get a bit more bullish. Now we certainly do, and I've dealt with tenants who will get advocates in and they'll probably, make them think, oh, you've got to get all this money back. No, it doesn't happen. And we haven't seen an increase. What is interesting is that we've just had a record quarter. So they're looking at data from every quarter for applications made. Now, there's a big spike and there's a massive drop. Why? COVID. Now, the majority of applications are rent arrears. These are the number of applications for rent arrears, which makes up roughly 90% of all landlord applications will have a rent arrears component around them. You've seen this huge drop here where COVID comes along and you have the lockdown. And it basically you're thinking, well, everybody loves each other. The lockdown's finished and everyone's paying the rent on time and no one's making applications. But then all of a sudden, it's just gone. And I think you're looking at the financial pressure that people are under, including landlords, some who may have been on a low interest rate going up from 2.5 to 6.5, 7. I was at the Real Estate Institute New Zealand conference at the start of the year. This guy from insurance spoke. I could not believe the claims. The spike in claims in 2023 basically were more than what happened, since they continued records. So you got increases in insurance. And of course all these councils are probably scrambling for money and looking at increasing rates. So all this pressure has gone on landlords to put rents up, plus the ridiculous rule of interest deductibility. So I'm so glad that's gone. That was, my view, the worst decision they made on property. It was an envy tax. Huh? And we've started to see a real spike in applications against tenants as people feel the pinch. There's no doubt it's tough. I mean, you probably gathered I'm not from New Zealand. I was a teenager, I was young when Thatcher was in power in the UK and we had high inflation, high unemployment and a whole heap of miners striking and a poll tax. And there's a bit of familiarity about what's happening in New Zealand, particularly around high unemployment, high inflation. Personally, I think this government's doing a lot of good stuff trying to get inflation down. So that's that. They've just announced changes to the Residential Tenancies Act. This is a proposed bill. It's at its first reading. It will go to a select committee, then it'll go to second reading, third reading, then it becomes law. But you can get the idea about what's going to happen. And I'm going to just touch on some of the things that are in this. But some of the information in this Residential Tenancy Amendment Bill tells you that there's 1.7 million renters in New Zealand. Right? This government is hoping that the bill is going to increase supply. I don't know if it will, but it's going to reverse a lot of the changes that Labour introduced in 2018 and 2020. A lot of this I don't agree with. All right? And I'll explain why. Okay? First of all, I agree with this. Pets. I am pet friendly. I believe everyone, if they want a pet, they should be able to have a pet. Within reason. Within reason. So reading the bill on dogs, cats, whatever, but, tenants are going to be allowed pets with the consent of the landlord, and the landlord cannot unreasonably refuse pets, or they cannot impose unreasonable conditions on tenants around pets. And we got into a really good debate in the office today around this. And Annalise, who's on her second day with us, and I could tell straight away I liked it because she started getting quite aggressive. I thought, you fit my bill, I like you. You don't prefer to have a go with me, and I like that. Right? So these are the conditions, and I'll come on to what Annalise raised, and she actually, in the end, I have to agree, she raised a pretty valid point. Reasons to not allow a pet. Premises are not suitable, relevant bylaws. So things like the body corporate. Okay? Size, type, breed, propensity, I'll have to look that word up, for causing damage and or a disruption. Dangerous or menacing dogs under the Dog Control Act. Good reasons to believe the dog has attacked a person or other animals. Alright? Which makes me very nervous about the 2 cats I've got, because those 2 cats have killed numerous birds. Anyway, the point that Annalise made was, well, we've got landlords who don't want dogs or cats, and the insurance policy says that they will cause damage, and this is when we got into a bit of a debate. And we came up with a solution that what we're going to put forward in the select committee. And actually I did read something similar in the UK was debated. I think tenants, they should be allowed pets, but a landlord should be able to say to a tenant, you need to have insurance to cover the damage. Because if a cat or a dog, and there is case law on this, if a cat or a dog pees numerously, that is, in the eyes of the Tenancy Tribunal, is defined as intentional damage. Now, an insurance may go one claim, that's $1,000, $1,000, $1,000, $1,000, and you're going, bloody hell, how am I going to get this out of the tenant? You know, you're probably not. You may have got a good debt collector, but you're probably not. But if you said to the tenants, yeah, you can have a pet, but you've got to have insurance that if the pet causes a lot of damage, or any damage, and we go in tribunal, your insurance is going to cover, so the landlord's not out of pocket, and that insurance company can then chase you, the tenant. I actually think that's a really good idea. And at least, you've only been in the job for 1 day, you've just got a pay rise. Congratulations, well done. Right? I think that's a fair compromise. I think that's a fair compromise. Sorry, Jamie, you've just bust your wage budget for the... right? This, now, I will openly admit, I will not endear myself to a number of landlords here, and I am very much in the minority within our industry. I don't agree with this. I do not believe that no cause termination should come back, because I do see this being abused. Right? I think there's a bit of compromise. I mean, this is what Labour used to have. This is what National are going to bring back. So Labour made all these changes. It was at 6 o'clock, it's gone to 12 o'clock. National are going to make it go back to 6 o'clock. I think we could probably find a bit of equilibrium in the middle somewhere. And what they're basically saying is a step back in time. You can give 90 days notice without a valid reason. Real estate agents will love this, by the way. I know that the real estate agents will love this. And it's going back to the 42 days notice for unconditional, how it used to be. Right? Now, the reason why I'm kind of not, and this is going to 21 days. Now, the reason why I'm not quite on board, we were involved in a case in Dunedin where a tenant who had a brain tumour, and the landlord said, I want to do up the house and sell it. And this made national news. In fact, it actually made international news. And I did the tribunal case. And the landlord instructed us to, right, we're going to renovate the house, give the tenant notice, and then we're going to sell it. So, you do know the tenant's got a brain tumour. Oh, yeah, well, you know, I need to do this. This is what we need. Okay, we just follow instructions. 2 days after the tenant moved out, the house was re-advertised with another company for renting $100 more. And the tenant seen it. And took us to tribunal, and good on her. Now, if that tenant deserved justice, right, what I would do, I would look at making reforms around tenancy tribunals so we can get antisocial tenants out quicker. The way how the law is written is wrong. You've got to have this 3 strikes over 90 days, and you've got to collect all this evidence. Now, I'm sorry, tribunal is a civil court process. It's balance of probabilities. The law is written in a way that we have to, like a criminal court, be on reasonable doubt. So what a landlord should be able to do is, these guys have been antisocial, got a little bit of evidence, this is unacceptable, they're a nuisance to the neighbourhood, we're giving them notice. And if the tenant doesn't like it, they can challenge in the tribunal, but it's up to the tenant to provide enough evidence to show that they do not deserve to be removed. I think that's a much further way of dealing with things. Right. I also think going to 21 days is the wrong thing to do. It should be 28 days, that should stay the same. Okay? Yeah, and that remains the same. Tenants, they've always been able to apply to tribunal if they feel that the notice is being sent to them retaliatory. So, we're doing Q&A at the end, so if you want to ask me questions about all this type of stuff, go for it. All right? And openly admit, I am in the minority. Okay? That's it from me. I hope you found some of that information interesting.